here at AKF, we are not one-trick ponies. So we realize the need to discuss and teach on a multitude of topics. So we obviously want to preach the gospel, we want to teach the Bible, but we don't want to forget what Jesus did, which is he used the events of the day, things that were going on while he was on earth, in order to teach spiritual truths. So I think a lot of churches actively and intentionally avoid the news of the day, as if it's not related to Christianity, our faith, the church. And in my opinion, ignoring the news of the day will only make us irrelevant to those who hear our message, and it will ensure that we squander a perfectly good opportunity to be a voice for God in this fallen world. So on May 19th of this year, 2021, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 8, a bill that the Texas legislature worked on passing since March. This piece of legislation is better known as the Texas Heartbeat Act. Now I'm going to come back to this, but first I want to show everyone a Facebook post that came up in my news feed this week, which I literally could not resist commenting on. Now, when I saw it, and then I saw who posted it, they were posting from someone else. They didn't write it. I immediately knew that if I were to comment, this person that knows me would be very upset. And I honestly expected that they would probably unfriend me. But I didn't care. I had to respond. So again, they were sharing a post from someone else that was making the rounds on Facebook. Maybe you've seen it. And here's what the post says. Here's the thing, guys. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when life begins. It doesn't matter whether a fetus is a human being or not. The entire argument is a red herring, a distraction, a subjective and unwinnable argument that could not matter less. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about a fertilized egg or a fetus or a baby or a 5-year-old or a Nobel Prize winning pediatric oncologist. Nobody has the right to use your body against your will, even to save their life or the life of another person. That's it. That's the argument. You cannot be forced to donate blood or marrow or organs, even though thousands die every year on waiting lists. They cannot even harvest your organs after your death without your explicit written pre-mortem permission. Denying women the right to abortion means we have less bodily autonomy than a corpse. Now you can see why I had to respond. The first thing that comes to my mind when reading something like this is the obvious hatred for children behind the person that wrote this because of a selfishness that has no bounds. And by the way, it's most likely not a coincidence that the person that I was Facebook friends with that I know who posted this has no children. And she has said in the past that she has zero desire to have children because she wants to live life the way she wants to live. The truth is that children are a gift from the Lord. Children are quite possibly the greatest blessing on planet Earth. I don't think, for me personally, I will ever be able to comprehend that we have the ability to literally create another human being. Of all the things that we have the freedom to do, how is that not at the top of the list? We can choose to create a brand new human being. Wow. So, how did I respond to this post? Well, before I get there, we need to do one more thing, and that is we need to define abortion. People love to use the word abortion, but they hate to define it. Now, granted, we all know what it means, but I think that's irrelevant. No one wants to define it, or they don't want to use a different word or phrase because it would further describe what abortion actually is, which is the intentional killing of an unborn child. That's it. It's the intentional killing of an unborn child, which countless people and the media avoid by using the word abortion. If you ask people, and I've done this, and I think it's a good exercise, to define what they mean when they use the word abortion, some of them will obfuscate by saying it means to end a pregnancy. Well, that's not valid. When my wife gives birth, she's ending her pregnancy, but that's not an abortion. Nice try. Care to try again. Others will say that abortion means to terminate a pregnancy. How's that for terminology? They're terminating a baby, but they would rather say that they're terminating a pregnancy. That's like referring to killing your born children as merely terminating your parenthood. So just remember, if you are ever in a discussion with someone concerning abortion, that abortion is simply the intentional killing of an unborn child. And if you're short on time, which I get, you can just shorten it to abortion is murder. That works as well. So, my response to this Facebook post was that the argument, meaning the argument that nobody has the right to use your body against your will, that argument breaks down immediately because parents have an obligation to care for and take care of their children. That's where the argument breaks down. Now, I don't like to call this an obligation because it's a joy and a privilege to take care of a baby, especially your own baby. But I'm dealing with incredibly selfish people here who are arguing for the right to kill their unborn children. So I've got to use the word obligation. So I point out to them that it is indeed an obligation to care for your own children, even if it means the children are fully dependent upon their parents for survival after birth. That's their argument, right? So think about it. This is especially true of a newborn baby, right? The newborn baby is arguably just as dependent upon the mother's body to survive as the baby was during pregnancy. Nothing magically happens once birth happens. So these people that are trying to defend abortion, they're not prepared to defend and stay logically consistent when you point out that a newborn baby is just as fully dependent on someone else's body for survival after birth. Oops. We got to get some stronger tape. Why does their argument fall? Their argument falls for one reason and one reason only, and that is because it's a baby. That's it. That's why the argument falls. If the unborn child is a baby, then any argument one can make will apply both to an unborn child and to a born child. So I went back and forth with this gal and a friend of hers, explaining that this argument was not valid, and I was quickly blocked and unfriended. You gotta love technology. It's a good thing Jesus came to earth before Facebook. Everybody would just block him. It's sad, by the way. It's very immature, but when people don't want to deal with an argument, they just stick their head in the sand, and that's the digital equivalent today. So let's return now to what I mentioned at the very beginning which is the Texas Heartbeat Act. When this was signed into law in September, everybody lost their minds. The abortion advocates lost their minds, which was predictable. How dare you tell me that I cannot kill my child whenever I want to? And the pro-life folks, they got excited. They acted like this was the single best victory since Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973. They would say things like, this is going to stop most abortions, or we are chipping away at Roe. It all sounds good, right? I mean, if the leftist media is losing their mind because this law will prevent women from being able to have abortions, that must be good, right? And if people are saying that this is the first thing to pass in decades that will actually chip away at Roe, we should support that, right? We should get on board. Well, as they say, the devil is in the details. And something that I think is important is to actually read the legislation for yourself. So here's some questions to ask yourself before we look at the bill together, before we look at the actual language in the bill. Does the legislation say that all unborn babies have the right to life? Does it say that babies without detectable heartbeats are just as important and worthy to be protected as those with detectable heartbeats? Does it say that even though this particular legislation will only apply to certain unborn children, that the others will still need to be protected by law? Let's look at the actual language of the legislation to see what it is they are saying will change with this law. Now, we're not going to look at everything. It's pretty lengthy, but we're going to look at certain sections that I believe are incredibly relevant. So here we have 171.201, Section 5. And they start by defining pregnancy as beginning with fertilization, when a woman is carrying human offspring, and is calculated from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period. So far, so good. In my opinion, all of that is accurate. The next section, they define what an unborn child is, and they define it as a human fetus or embryo at any stage of gestation from fertilization until birth. That's really good. Why is this good? It means they know exactly, meaning the authors and supporters of this bill, they know exactly when an unborn child's life begins at fertilization, and the unborn child ceases to be unborn at birth as the little boy or girl is now born. So now that terms have been properly defined, and I think they did a very good job here, let's get to the meat of the bill and see what it actually says. So they start out here by saying that a fetal heartbeat is a key medical predictor that an unborn child will reach live birth. You can see it with your own eyes. Is this true? Not really. The number one key predictor in the world today that an unborn child will reach live birth is if the mother does not kill the unborn child. That is the number one predictor today. The next section, they say that cardiac activity begins at an identifiable moment in time, normally when the fetal heart is formed. Is this true? Not one bit. Do you know why they use the term cardiac activity and not heartbeat here? I mean, they're advertising this as the Texas Heartbeat Act. Why do they change the terminology? It's because the heartbeat starts before there's a heart. That's why. They knew they needed to make this language medically accurate, and so they referred to it as cardiac activity, which is accurate. So, embryos, interestingly enough, do not have hearts, but they have heartbeats. How can this be? Well, what is universally known as a heartbeat, it's actually pulsating cells, and these cells start pulsating just 18 days after fertilization. 18 days, less than 3 weeks. And this is long before the heart itself forms. So not only are they wrong here, but it's quite misleading. Don't you think it's important for people to know that the heartbeat starts 18 days after fertilization? Of course it is. But it's not easily detectable at this stage. It's not easily detectable 18 days later, which is why they don't want to say it in this legislation. And this will make more sense in a minute. This next part here says that the state of Texas has a compelling interest in protecting the health of the woman and the life of the unborn child. Now, I would agree here. So here's an interesting question. They've acknowledged that they have a compelling interest to protect not only the mother, but also the life of who? The unborn child. So are they willing to protect the life of the unborn child that they just defined for us? Remember, they defined it as a human fetus or embryo at any stage of gestation from fertilization until birth. Let's keep going to find out. Next, it says that a pregnant woman needs to know the likelihood of her unborn child surviving to birth in order to make an informed choice about whether to continue her pregnancy. Huh? What in the world does that mean? Hopefully that read as bizarre to you as it did to me. To make an informed choice about whether to continue her pregnancy sounds just like the rhetoric we hear from pro-abortion advocates. Making a choice to continue your pregnancy is obfuscation so that you don't have to say what this really means, which is making a choice whether or not you want to kill your unborn child. That is what that means. Let's go to the next section. This next part looks really good. It says that a physician may not knowingly perform or induce an abortion on a pregnant woman. Now, that's something I can get behind. Hopefully you can too. But wait, something's wrong. Notice there's no period after the word woman. Unfortunately, this is not how this section ends. Let's look at the entire section B. This actually says a physician cannot perform or induce an abortion unless. That's horrible language. And to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter what follows the word unless. Nothing, and I mean nothing, will make killing an unborn child right. Imagine any other laws using the word unless. You cannot rape a woman unless. You cannot molest a child unless. You cannot murder another person unless. The thought of that is unfathomable. And so this law says a physician cannot kill an unborn child unless the physician has determined whether the woman's unborn child has a detectable fetal heartbeat. This clearly implies what? That the physician can kill the unborn child if there is no detectable heartbeat. Which brings us to another problem. Now they've added the word detectable. How's that? As we discussed earlier, they used the term cardiac activity because the heartbeat begins before there is a heart. Well, guess what? The heartbeat also starts before it's detectable by readily accessible means. So this means that physicians can also kill unborn children with heartbeats as long as the heartbeat is still undetectable. If you recall, the heartbeat starts 18 days after fertilization. Guess when the heartbeat is first detectable? And that's not until 6 weeks, approximately 6 weeks after fertilization. That's quite a difference. 18 days, 6 weeks. So maybe we should stop calling this a heartbeat law and call it for what it is. It's a detectable heartbeat law, because there's a significant difference there. Maybe it's appropriate that the next section is called Section 171.204, Prohibited Abortion of Unborn Child with Detectable Fetal Heartbeat. It's not prohibited to abort a child with a heartbeat, just with a detectable heartbeat. This section states that a physician may not knowingly perform or induce an abortion on a pregnant woman, and if it stopped there, it would be a good law, but it doesn't. It says that a physician may not perform or induce an abortion if the physician detected a fetal heartbeat. What does that mean? It means the physician can perform or induce an abortion if a fetal heartbeat is not detected. And that is exactly what the next section says. It explicitly says here that a physician does not violate this section if a fetal heartbeat is not detected. That is clear permission to perform an abortion, i.e., kill an unborn child under certain circumstances. Again, when would this make any sense at all with any other egregious crime? To give explicit permission to commit said crime under certain circumstances. This legislation doesn't improve either. As we keep looking at what the bill says, it then says that a woman in direct violation of the law, meaning who intentionally pays for an abortion of her unborn child with a detectable heartbeat, cannot be punished. This subchapter, here's what it says. This subchapter may not be construed to authorize the initiation of a cause of action against or the prosecution of a woman on whom an abortion is performed. It explicitly says that a woman in violation of the law cannot be punished. How's that? Last time I checked, abortionists are not out killing women's unborn children against their will. It's the woman who is with child that makes the decision to end the life of that child before an abortionist even comes into the picture. So the initiator of this horrible crime is not allowed to be punished. As I mentioned early on, it's the same person, the same human being who is in the womb that lives outside of the womb after birth. If they are the same person, and they are, then any argument in the womb also applies out of the womb. So let's try something. Let's go back and let's reread these sections of the so-called Texas Heartbeat Act, and let's change them to applying to children once they are born. This is a simple test we can perform to see if the legislation makes any sense whatsoever. I put all of the changes in brackets so that it's clear to see the change that I'm making. I don't want to be accused of misquoting here. So 171.201, Section 7. Born child means a human being in any stage of life from birth until death. So far, so good. 171.202, 1A. A heartbeat has become a key medical predictor that a born child will live. Makes some sense? 171.202, Section 3. Texas has compelling interests from the outset of a woman's labor in protecting the health of the woman and the life of the born child. Could not agree more. 171.202, Section 4. To make an informed choice about whether to continue parenthood, the woman has a compelling interest in knowing the likelihood of her born child surviving to normal life expectancy based on the presence of cardiac activity. This is where it starts to get a little weird. Would anyone in their right mind think that makes any sense? Why does a woman need to make an informed choice about whether or not to continue being a mother? Why does the mother have a compelling interest in knowing the likelihood that her born child will survive some normal amount of time? Just as this makes absolutely zero sense to look at through the lens of a born child, it makes no sense whatsoever to speak this way about an unborn child. 171.203b. A physician may not knowingly end the life of a child of a previously pregnant woman unless the physician has determined, in accordance with this section, whether the woman's born child has a detectable heartbeat. Let that sink in. Why would anyone ever consider passing such a law like that? You wouldn't, right? And why not? Because there is no reason to ever intentionally end the life of a newborn child. That's the reason. Insert whatever you want in there, okay? It doesn't have to be a detectable heartbeat after birth. It could be 20/20 vision. How about normal height and weight? Maybe athletic ability, right? It doesn't matter what you put in there. It's horrific, the thought that such a law would ever be passed. Literally nothing would ever lead us to pass a law explicitly granting permission for a physician to kill the newborn child of a mother for any reason. And lastly, 171.206b. This subchapter may not be construed to authorize the initiation of a cause of action against or the prosecution of a woman whom has her born child killed by a physician in violation of this subchapter. When would we ever not blame the person who initiated the crime? When would we ever not blame the person who paid for the crime? When would we not blame the person who hired someone to commit the crime? That is what this bill does. It's unthinkable. No law would ever be passed by this. So why do this to a human being who is not yet born? It doesn't make any sense. And keep in mind, this is the law that's being paraded as the greatest victory since Roe v. Wade at eliminating and getting rid of Roe. So because this law does not recognize the personhood of the baby in the womb, because it does not stop with "thou shalt not murder," and ends with "if you do not detect a heartbeat, then you can kill the baby," this gave the U.S. Supreme Court something very easy to wiggle out of. As soon as this law was passed in Texas, multiple lawsuits were filed, Biden got involved, and they wanted to quickly get this in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I'm a bit naive on, how things work in our extremely complicated, government system, but apparently there are ways to do that, and they did that. And what did the Supreme Court do? But by the way, I had zero faith in the Supreme Court, even though they tell us it's like the most pro-life court we've ever had. What did the Supreme Court do? They punted. They're spineless, they're gutless, and they wiggled out of this. By the way, this all happened this past week. That's why I'm talking about this today. And I figured we should get the talk of killing an unborn child out of the way so that we could talk about the unborn child and his birth, Jesus, next week for Christmas. So what the Supreme Court did was completely predictable. Here's my thought. Let's give the Supreme Court something that actually has teeth. Let's actually challenge Roe. I can only hope and pray that the Supreme Court would do the right thing and recognize that abortion is murder and overturn Roe v. Wade. That would be phenomenal. But I'm not going to hold my breath. What I can tell you, though, is that if they did not do this, meaning we actually give the Supreme Court something that says abortion is murder, that says the right to life is protected because of the personhood of the unborn child, and this Supreme Court that supposedly is now stacked with pro-life judges, if they did not overturn Roe, if they did not recognize that abortion is murder, at least people will finally see with their own eyes that the U.S. Supreme Court is not the answer. And maybe then we can finally unite with a new strategy to end abortion, one that will actually work. Let's pray. Father in heaven, just want to come to you today and thank you so much for the freedom you've given us to worship you and to fellowship with other believers, to learn about you, to study your word. And I pray that we use the news of the day, the atrocities of the day, and what's going on out in the real world as a way to teach people that you exist, to teach people that truth exists, and to defend and protect the innocent, which you want us to do. We pray for wisdom. It's a very difficult battle. It's an uphill battle. There's a lot of people standing in the way, a lot of enemies, but we just pray for wisdom to know exactly what we can do that will have the most effect while we're here for a short time on earth. Pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.